I first learned that I had cancer when I was a teenager. I was angry. I felt that this disease was going to cut into my happy years, my high school years. And to me, being a young teen, it also meant that I was going to carry a scar for the rest of my life that I felt would make me less attractive. It wasn't till much later in my life that I came to understand the severity of what I had gone through and fully appreciated the fact that I had made a full recovery from it.
Joanne Archambault is now 40 years old and again has cancer. For nearly half of her life, she's been battling this disease.
Today I feel there is a much greater understanding of cancer. There is much more hope out there. There have been more strides, of course, made over a period of the 20 years that it's been since I went through my first bout with cancer. And because of all this, I think the fear has lessened somewhat for the patient. My whole outlook is a lot more optimistic than it would have been 20 years ago.
Thousands of individuals like Joanne are challenging our beliefs and attitudes about cancer. Over the last decade, capabilities in diagnosing and treating cancer have progressed at an astounding pace. Today's arsenal of anti-cancer weapons makes it possible for many cancer patients to resume active and nearly normal lives. By breaking from the negative and fatalistic attitudes of the past, the medical community, along with cancer patients themselves, bring us more than just a message of hope. For many individuals, cancer is becoming a treatable disease. Not too long ago, the word cancer often was synonymous with death and hopelessness. Today, however, millions of individuals treated for this disease have been cured. Yet, despite advances in cancer research, diagnosis, and treatment, the sobering fact remains: cancer is on the increase. 1 in every 4 persons living today will develop cancer sometime during their life. 2 out of 3 families will be affected by the disease. But of the 750,000 people treated for cancer this year, 1/3 will be cured and thousands of others will gain control over their illness. During this program, we'll look at attitudes and beliefs about cancer and how these are changing. We'll meet several cancer patients who will share with us some of their experiences and insights in battling this threatening challenge to life. We'll listen to a medical specialist who will explain his role as a cancer fighter and discuss a new approach for treating the disease. We'll also look into community resources and support services for cancer patients and their families. But by far, the most important message of this program is for you and me to realize that cancer should no longer be equated with death and despair. A more hopeful side to cancer is emerging. However, for many of us, our ideas, attitudes, and beliefs about cancer may still lie somewhere in the past. Since the beginning of recorded history, cancer has inflicted its torment on mankind. The ancient Greek physician Hippocrates was the first to identify and name the disease. He called it carcinos, meaning crab, because the swollen veins of the deadly tumors resembled tiny crab-like creatures. Medical understanding about cancer advanced little throughout the Middle Ages. Treatment methods involved cauterization or burning, bloodletting, special diets, surgery, incantations, and prayers. It wasn't until the 17th century that scientists began to better understand the nature of this mysterious disease. With the invention of the microscope, physicians discovered that cancer is a disease of the cell. But despite new insights, many problems and confusions still remain. Treatment methods were crude and largely ineffective. Also, many physicians believed that cancer was contagious. For years to follow, cancer patients were stigmatized, shamed, isolated, and inhumanly treated. Not until the early part of this century did many of the superstitions and misconceptions about cancer begin to fade away. The development of more powerful microscopes enabled researchers to better understand the cellular nature of the disease. Surgical methods were improved, contributing to greater success in removing certain cancerous tumors. Experiments with radiation led to the discovery that cancer cells could be destroyed by X-rays. The development of radiation treatments opened a door for greater therapeutic possibilities. Still, the majority of cancer patients had little hope for long-term survival. Then, in the 1940s, a new weapon was added to the cancer arsenal. Chemicals capable of destroying rapidly dividing cells were developed. Chemotherapy treatments began to offer many patients with advanced stages of the disease increased hope for survival. For the first time in history, medical science was gaining a foothold against this formidable killer. But by far, the greatest effort ever to conquer cancer was launched during the 1970s. Government and private funds contributed toward better educating physicians and nurses about more effective forms of cancer treatment. Experiments with new drugs and therapy programs, along with advances in medical technology, raised hopes that someday the great killer would be controlled and conquered. Today, over 3,000 cancer specialists called oncologists are working in community hospitals and medical centers, making newer and better treatment options more accessible to cancer patients. We've come a long way in unraveling some of cancer's mystery. We know that cancer is not just one disease, but rather a large family of diseases with more than 250 different types. Cancer begins in the tiny cells of our body. Whereas normal cells grow and reproduce in an orderly way, cancer cells grow for no purpose. They look different than normal cells and spread uncontrolled throughout the body, destroying any normal tissues that get in their way. As cancer cells grow, a group of cells called a tumor usually forms. Eventually, fragments of these tumors break off and establish new colonies in distant parts of the body. This is called metastasis, and unless stopped, can take over the body and cause death. We must emphasize that cancer is not a contagious disease. It cannot be spread from person to person by sneezing, coughing, kissing, or in any other way. The exact cause of cancer is not clearly understood. However, evidence suggests that several factors such as heredity, contact with certain chemical and physical agents, immunological disorders, or even abnormal viruses may predispose a person to the disease. With the incidence of cancer increasing today, the best defense measure we can take is early detection and diagnosis. And despite modern advances in cancer treatment, thousands of individuals will die this year who might otherwise be saved if a diagnosis had been made during an early, controllable stage of the disease. But what happens when a person is diagnosed as having cancer? What kinds of fears, anxieties, and misconceptions confront individuals affected by the disease? Let's listen now as several cancer patients tell us how they dealt with their diagnosis and provide us with some insight into this often misunderstood affliction.
It was funny because it was almost like a dream that I hear this word, leukemia. You know, you hear the word a lot of times, but now when a doctor is saying to you, you have leukemia, I really didn't think, you know, much about how serious it probably was or anything like that.
Well, prior to discovering that I had cancer, I knew that it was a very deadly and dangerous disease. But fortunate to me was the fact that I knew several individuals who were cured of the disease in the past few years. In fact, 6 months prior to finding out the type of cancer I had a very close friend who was diagnosed with the same disease, and he had achieved a full remission with the hope of being cured. So when I received my diagnosis, although I had many fears and apprehensions associated with it, because it was me that the doctor was talking about, I still felt encouraged when I thought about other individuals I knew who had come out of it successfully.
When I first learned I had the cancer, it more or less confirmed in my mind that when I went to see the doctor, I pretty much knew I had cancer. And his diagnosis just basically confirmed the idea in my mind that I did have the disease. So I really wasn't shocked so much as to know that I had the cancer. My main concern at that time was just to get on with some kind of a treatment to get the cancer under control. When my family, of course, found out I had cancer, their immediate reaction was, he's going to die. You know, automatic concept, mostly because of my aunt who had died of breast cancer, and their lack of knowledge of what the disease really was. And they tried to shelter me more than anything else. They wanted me to stay at home, not overexert myself, not carry out any sort of physical activities. And my immediate plan was to put my life into as much order as possible, get it back to some sort of normalcy, continue on with my work, all my outside functions. And eventually, I won them over on my game plan. And no regrets as far as anything like that goes. They pretty much accept my will and my feelings, and they've been very supportive.
I had to go through all kinds of various tests. I had to be hospitalized to go through some of the tests. And for each test, I made it my business to ask why and what they hoped to achieve by putting me through these tests. I became very interested in what was going on with me. I wanted to learn as much as I possibly could. Sometimes I drove the technicians and the doctors crazy with questions that I asked. But each time that I did and I got answers, I felt more comfortable in the fact that I had a little bit of knowledge as to what they were doing to me and why.
My first doctor referred me to a cancer specialist. And he talked to me and he told me that I was young and healthy, and he thought we had a real good shot at, curing it. I didn't know anything about, I just thought, people died from that. And I was scared and I thought about it a lot.
I felt most comfortable completely being open and honest with friends and family about the disease, the prognosis, and I think that was the greatest consolation to people that cared about me, is that they felt that they were a part of what I was going through and of the recovery, that in order for them to be supportive of me, they had to understand exactly what it was that I was facing and what I had to go through to achieve my final goal. I had no qualms about being completely honest with the bad parts of the prognosis and the good parts, and I think that it helped me in sharing it with people who were intelligent and could offer suggestions and inspiration to me when I needed it. And I think to hide it and not talk about it would be seriously detrimental.
The most important aspect of cancer is a second opinion, sometimes a third opinion. Doctors are not infallible. Things can be mistaken. I felt better seeking 2 and 3 opinions from doctors. When 3 doctors confirmed the same diagnosis, then I could accept the fact that I did in fact have a certain type of cancer, and to pick up from there and realize that now we're going to battle it together.
The best attitude for someone who's diagnosed with cancer to have is a positive attitude. A positive attitude that they're going to be recovered, that their life is going to continue, and that they'll be able to lead a full and productive life. And anybody around them, their friends and so forth, should support that attitude towards the people. They shouldn't try to hold them back from from trying anything or accomplishing anything. If they feel they can do something, they should encourage them to go out and try and fulfill their dreams.
Each patient deals with cancer in his or her individual way. However, several important points need to be emphasized. First, cancer diagnosis usually begins with the individual who recognizes a danger signal and then seeks medical attention. From the moment of the suspected illness, the patient must assume an active role. The best way to begin is to obtain a diagnosis or opinion from at least 2 qualified medical specialists. After the diagnosis is confirmed, the patient must take responsibility to learn about his or her disease and to openly discuss questions or concerns with physicians. Also important is that the patient maintain a positive attitude and seek out the best resources and support available. It is essential for each cancer patient to select a qualified cancer specialist called an oncologist. This specially trained physician works closely with the patient to manage, treat, and we hope, to control or cure the disease. Let's listen to a cancer specialist as he explains the field of oncology and describes his role as a cancer fighter.
The word oncology comes from a Greek word meaning tumor. Oncologists are physicians who specialize in the treatment of cancer. My own specialty is medical oncology. Medical oncologists are first of all trained as specialists in general internal medicine. Afterwards, 2 to 3 years are devoted to special knowledge of cancer treatment. There are really 4 aspects to this further training. First of all, the medical oncologist studies the natural history of the different kinds of cancers. Secondly, the medical oncologist learns to coordinate the different kinds of cancer treatments so that the best plan for a given patient can be developed. Thirdly, the medical oncologist learns a special area of cancer treatment, which is called chemotherapy, the use of several different drugs to destroy tumors. And probably as important as any of these other things, the medical oncologist studies supportive care. This means the treatment of pain, the treatment of nutrition, and psychological support for the patient. In other words, one could say that the medical oncologist is a family physician for the cancer patient. There are other oncologic specialties. A pediatric oncologist, for instance, is very similar to a medical oncologist, except that these individuals deal with cancer in children. A radiation oncologist is a specialist who has developed skills in treating cancer with cobalt therapy or with X-ray therapy. This specialty requires a knowledge of radiation physics and radiation biology. A gynecologic oncologist is a gynecologic surgeon who's taken advanced training in the treatment of cancers of the female genital tract. A gynecologic oncologist very often uses chemotherapy and radiation therapy in the treatment of these tumors in addition to surgery. Finally, there is a specialty called surgical oncology. A surgical oncologist is a general surgeon who's taken advanced training in cancer surgery. A surgical oncologist also uses the other tools of cancer care, radiation and chemotherapy, in order to offer the patient the best possible treatment.
As we've learned, an oncologist skillfully manages the patient's disease by working with the patient to prescribe certain treatment methods. Cancer is becoming treatable today because the tools available to halt its growth are continuously being improved. 3 main treatment methods are used by oncologists to control and cure cancer. The oldest and most widely used method is surgery. In order to rid the body of cancerous tissue, surgeons cut away and attempt to remove the tumor. Surgery is generally used when cancer is diagnosed early, when the tumor is small, and when the cancer has not spread to other parts of the body. Radiation therapy is another method used to control and cure cancer. Since cancer cells are sensitive to X-rays, many tumors will shrink when exposed to precise and periodic doses of radiation. Radiation therapy is frequently prescribed when cancer has spread throughout the body, when surgery is too risky, or when a particular type of tumor is susceptible to radiation. The third and newest method for treating cancer is chemotherapy. Chemicals or anti-cancer drugs are used to stop the growth of malignant tissue. These drugs have their greatest therapeutic value when the disease has spread throughout the body. Although chemotherapy sometimes produces temporary side effects, such as hair loss or nausea, newer drugs and techniques are continually being developed which minimize these side effects. As our treatment arsenal expands, so must the knowledge and skill of cancer specialists. Many changes have occurred over the last few years in the way oncologists approach and treat cancer. To bring us up to date on this, let's listen to our oncologist tell us about a newer approach to cancer treatment.
A patient with cancer in this day and age has about a 50% chance of being cured. For the other 50%, generally there is a certain classical approach taken to the disease. I'd like to illustrate that with this particular diagram. Here you have a situation where a patient is treated for cancer and the cancer continues to come back. And that's what's meant by this arrow that says natural history of cancer. When the patient is first treated, the treatment is often surgery. The surgeon attempts to remove all of the disease. Sometimes the patient is well controlled for a certain length of time, and other times the surgeon finds that there is still disease that he can't remove. At that point, in the traditional approach, the patient was usually referred to a radiation oncologist or a radiation therapist who would then try to control a local disease with his tool, which is radiation therapy or cobalt treatments or X-ray treatments. When this finally failed, the patient was then sent to a medical oncologist who would try to treat the patient with drugs. The problem with this sort of approach is that very often cure is possible when all the tools that can be used to treat the patient are used at the very beginning. Most specialists in the field of cancer treatment today would advocate a different way of approaching the cancer patient. We call this a multidisciplinary approach. By multidisciplinary, we take into account the fact that the cancer is best treated when it is young and has not had time to develop resistance to the different kinds of treatment. We also take into account the fact that when the different treatments that we have are used in a logical way with good planning, then we can extend the quality of life of the patient for as long as possible. This diagram illustrates the multidisciplinary approach to cancer care. When the patient is first diagnosed as having cancer, generally a medical oncologist assesses the whole situation, looking at the kind of cancer, the extent of spread, and considering the patient's own general health. The medical oncologist then considers the best way to use surgery, radiation therapy, and chemotherapy to treat this patient's disease and at the same time do as little harm as possible to the patient. For this reason, the medical oncologist also brings in his knowledge of supportive care, which has to do with pain control, improvement in general health, and psychological support.
Progress in treating cancer patients has extended beyond the walls of medical centers and hospitals. A growing number of resources and support services for cancer patients exist right in our own communities. To tell us more about this, we have with us now several guests. On my right is Bonnie Megliola. She's an oncology nurse, and she's worked with cancer patients and their families for over 15 years. Next, we have Ruth Lewin from the American Cancer Society. Ruth works with many cancer patients in providing counseling and other forms of support services. We also have with us Bob Driscoll. Bob is a cancer patient who has been actively involved in patient support groups for the last few years. Bob, if I may, I'd like to begin with you. And would you be kind enough to explain the kinds of support that cancer patients need the most?
Well, once I was diagnosed as having cancer, the doctor came into my hospital room and told me that I had inoperable lung cancer. And as soon as he said the word cancer, I didn't hear anything else he said. He talked for quite a while, but it was all a blur. When I got home from the hospital, I used to just sit by myself in the kitchen. I was totally isolated. I couldn't talk to my wife, my kids. I just felt all alone. And every morning I'd wake up thinking it was all a nightmare. And as soon as I opened my eyes, I used to say, I'm dying. And I went on like this for quite a while, and I just couldn't cope with it. I was trying to seek some help somewhere, but I just didn't know where to look. I felt all alone. But I knew there was somebody somewhere that could help me, but I just didn't know where.
Thank you, Bob. Bonnie, as a nurse, having close contact with the cancer patients and their families, what is your relationship with these individuals, and what types of resources and support are actually available?
Actually, my role is multifaceted. Not only do I administer the therapy prescribed by the physician, but I act as a bridge to help patients and their families deal with the changes incurred by the cancer. I think illness, and cancer in particular, creates a sense of helplessness, both on the part of the patient and his family. Helping people to help themselves is a primary goal of the nurse. Providing information about the disease and teaching skills to help them manage the effects of the disease as well as therapy is of prime importance. Moreover, because I'm in a position where I can have the most direct contact with the patient, I'm able to identify various types of needs, whether they be medical, social, or psychological in nature. There are many resources within the community that can be tapped for assistance. There are resources in the hospital situation, such as social, psychiatric, and dietary services that can meet some of these needs. However, there are many agencies within the community that can be utilized to provide transportation, financial assistance, and nursing care, as well as support. There are a variety of support groups available to help patients learn to share common fears and concerns and to deal with those.
Thank you, Bonnie. That establishes a key for us. Ruth, with the American Cancer Society, what's the purpose of a so-called self-help group for cancer patients, and how does this actually help individuals to deal with the disease?
The purpose is mainly to bring people together who are in the same situation to share their feelings. They can very openly discuss their feelings of fears and frustrations that this disease brings with it. By sharing, they get support. By sharing, they counteract that feeling of helplessness that Bonnie has referred to. It gives them strength because other people have identical feelings. As Bob mentioned, the loneliness is so common. One of our patients put it, it's like sitting on a very lonely hill. She needed, as Bob also did, to have people to talk to. When she came to us, she shared her feelings, and it helped her cope with the situation. Communication with people who understand is really the key.
Maybe we can enlarge on that a little bit again. Back to you, Bob. And in what ways have these support groups helped you, and who, in turn, can benefit most from these groups?
Well, although it's been 3 years since I was diagnosed, I still have the fear of a reoccurrence. But since I've joined this support group that I belong to, we go there and we just talk openly about our problems. And everybody, we all have something in common. We all have cancer, or we're being treated at the time. And the families also go, so they'll know how to cope with it. It's helped me quite a bit. Once I joined the support group, I've learned I can cope a lot better with my sickness.
Ruth, again, here's an opportunity for you to answer another question I have in mind. Can you tell us how persons can actually find out more about these cancer patient resources and support services in their areas or communities?
Well, again, back to Bonnie, the oncology nurse really should have a good deal of information to give them. The American Cancer Society, Leukemia Society are good resources. They will guide you to whatever support groups are in the community, because these organizations sponsor some of these support groups. There is a telephone service, National Cancer Information Service, and again, your oncology nurse or Cancer Society will have the number for that you can call. There are resource booklets in many communities that will list resources for patients. But go to your oncology nurse, go to your hospital social worker. They will give you a start.
Thank you, Ruth. Bonnie, Ruth, Bob, thank you very much for being with us and talking about this morning. In the past, many people regarded cancer patients as helpless victims. This is no longer true. Today, many consider cancer a chronic disease, which may not always be cured, but can often be controlled. The cancer patients we heard from earlier have more to tell us about the hidden realities behind cancer treatment and what it's like to gain control and even be cured of this disease.
There are many misconceptions in the eye of the general public as to cancer patients. Many people feel that a cancer patient can't carry on in a normal fashion. They feel that a cancer patient is doomed to a life of isolation, feeling physically terrible, sitting there waiting for the hand of doom to reach out to them. This isn't necessarily true.
I was concerned that I would show very badly physically the drain that the treatment would take on me, that I would lose my hair and become pale and thin. And that was a misconception I had, and I think many people have. But what I found since then, that my experience, as is the experience of many cancer patients, is that the chemotherapy is not readily obvious to anyone. And sometimes I can't believe that I went through it all, because I never felt that I looked considerably different. And many people who knew me quite well never even knew that I had the disease or was treated. I, at one point, was only missing 4 days of work a month. And in light of that, I think I functioned almost completely normally through the experience.
I just, kept going and stuff. I was still going to school at the time that I had it. And I went back to school. After I felt a little better, I started going back to school. That was good. It started building up my strength again, and I didn't look any different after I had the treatments than before I started them. And now it's been a long time since I've had it, and I guess I look just about like anybody else.
Once I saw my local doctor, he referred me to an oncologist, and he evaluated me and placed me in the hospital for a biopsy on my neck to determine just what type of cancer I did have. And after the biopsy results were confirmed, I was told I had blastic lymphoma. And he shared with me his thoughts for treatment, chemotherapy, radiation therapy, over an extended period of 2 years. So we initiated the treatments. I was released from the hospital on Saturday and went back to work the following Monday and worked a full-time schedule throughout the course of the treatments. The only time I took off from work was to come down to the hospital for outpatient treatments. And I've been coming in and out for treatments ever since. That's been 3.5 years now. And try to keep working as much as possible.
I try not to even think that I've had cancer. And I get up every morning and glad that I got up and see the sun and all that, and starting to, work part-time and playing golf that I've always enjoyed doing, back up to my boat, which I thought I would never see again. You just have to be strong and just say, I'm going to get better, and just make it a point that I'm going to get better. I'm not going to let the cancer get me, because it's not It's not a killer all the way. I mean, I'll still have a normal life, and I'll just take a day at a time, you know, which I was doing before, but I didn't know it.
The best attitude for a cancer patient to have on embarking on treatment, or just on the idea of it alone, that cancer has infiltrated your life and interrupted it, is to be completely aggressive. Never at any moment be gentle with yourself. Never think that you lack the strength or the character or the stamina to overcome anyone, no matter what the prognosis is. Because I truly believe that there is nothing that the individual can't overcome. And I think that it's important that everyone involved with that person gives them their utmost support and positive attitude, because I think the single most important thing in attacking something so critical as a cancer disease is to be as aggressive as possible, and don't ever be gentle.
My attitude at first wasn't too good, you know. I didn't think it would ever go away, or I could ever be cured. But then, once I started feeling better, I felt a lot better after a couple of treatments. My attitude started changing. My family and friends, they helped me out a lot. I think the best attitude to have is that you're gonna beat it no matter what. Nothing's gonna hold you back, you just gotta go for it, you know? And you gotta have an attitude to win.
Throughout this program, we've focused on the brighter and more hopeful side of cancer. We cannot deny that this disease has caused much grief and pain for many, and it is still our country's second greatest killer. But if we look back to where we were a century or even a decade ago, there's much to be optimistic about. As medical achievements continue, more and more cancer patients will be cured in the years to come. Our attitudes and beliefs about cancer are changing dramatically. Medical specialists, along with thousands of cancer patients, have proven to us that controlling cancer is more than just a hope. It's a reality. Cancer is a treatable disease.